As Sarah said, yes, we're at the Holocaust Memorial Museum of San Antonio. This is a very somber place, so we're going to be talking quieter today. We wanted to have a lesson. We're at the end of Sarah's 6-week period, so typically what we do are tests and projects. So she has been reading Linked here. This is a book about a little boy, a little Jewish boy, who didn't know about his Jewish heritage until after he did a act of vandalism where he drew a swastika out of rebellion at school. So, and then he goes through this coming of age lesson where he learns about his heritage, learns about tolerance, and why that symbol has become a symbol of hatred in our world. So, come with us as we learn. Adrian's a little fussy today, so we might have some outbursts, and we might have to cut this short. We already had issues with the live connection here, so we're doing this recorded, and then we'll post it later.
In July 1940, Nazi forces invaded France. To minimize casualties, the French government signed a treaty with Germany, splitting the country in two. Germany agreed to occupy the northwestern half of the country, and the French government maintained control of the southwestern half, known as Vichy France. The Vichy government, however, remained sympathetic to Nazi ideology, particularly in their actions against the Jewish people.
Okay, so do you know what ideology means?
No, I do not.
So ideology is a way of thinking. So the Nazi ideology was what we were discussing earlier, that they believed their race was superior to others, and they believed Jewish was inferior. So the Jewish race needed to be exterminated according to the Nazi ideology. So there was a certain type of person, the way they looked and where they came from, that made them suitable, people that should live. Okay? And Jewish people were not seen as those deemed to survive. Do you understand? Okay, so go ahead.
The Jewish community in both Vichy and northwestern France faced many new anti-Jewish laws and
Regulations
due to the Nazi occupation. Lucien Moreau and his family struggled with these laws, as well as the betrayal of those close to him during this dangerous time.
What I was talking about here is, you see the map here for France?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so can you point to where they're talking about for Vichy?
It should be
What
right
color
over
is that?
here. I think that Vichy France should be all the lighter color.
So the purple, right?
Yeah.
Okay. See how it says this free zone?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the occupied zone was all that part in the north, so the pink and red. Okay,
And
that's
the
where
orangish
that's
color.
where Germany occupied. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what did we learn about that region of France yesterday when we were in Castroville? What is that called? So the part kind of where Grenoble is, and it says Italian occupation. What was that called?
I forgot.
Started with an A. Alsace.
Right.
Okay. We're going to be going to the Alsatian Festival on Saturday in Castroville. Okay, so that's a region of France that was right along the border of France and Germany. Okay, so that goes down from the south part where it says Grenoble all the way up into the area where it says Strasbourg up there. You see that? So we've been to Strasbourg. You remember?
Yes.
Okay, Strasbourg, we went there for the Christmas market because we lived, if you go off the map to the right, that's where Hamburg is. Okay, kind of over where it says Albert Speer over here is generally where Hamburg would be. Okay, so do you see the figures down here in the bottom?
Yes, I do.
Do you know who the figure in the middle is?
I think he is Adolf Hitler.
Adolf Hitler. So do you know who Adolf Hitler was?
No.
Adolf Hitler was the leader of the Nazi Party. Okay. So he was named Chancellor in Germany in, I believe, 1931. Hey, buddy, it's okay. I believe it was in 1931 when he was named the Chancellor, which means he was in charge. He was the main, pay attention, he was the main person in charge of Germany. When Germany gained control of France, the Nazis ordered all Jews to close their businesses and turn in all raw manufacturing materials. Lucien Moreau, a Christian, was director of a Jewish-owned mattress company who was affected by the new laws. Because of these new laws, he was forced to lay off the employees of the company and close the warehouse. Lucien hoped the invasion would be short-lived and requested the local government on behalf of the owners to reopen the warehouse to no avail. Little did he know that the closure of Jewish businesses was only the beginning of what would come to be known as the Holocaust. Let's move on. Okay, so what is the Holocaust, Sarah?
The Holocaust is a war where 6 million Jews were killed by the Nazis.
Okay, so the war was actually World War II, okay? And that was when the Allies joined together against the Nazis, Japan, and Italy, okay? So that was called the Axis powers. But the Holocaust itself is typically it denotes the massacre of the Jews, okay, the Jewish population. Okay? So you're right in that regard, but it wasn't exactly the war. It was when the Nazis started occupying countries, they started rounding up Jewish people. So they would load them on trains and they would take them to prison camps and then ultimately concentration camps. Do you know what those were?
They were camps where I think they put the Jews in big metal rooms and with only a bucket for waste, and they killed them.
Yes, concentration camps were camps where they would be forced into labor, and the ones who weren't forced into labor would be exterminated. So they would be put in what's called a gas chamber. And they would be told that they were going in there to be showered and clean, but they would get the gas would come into that chamber and they would all die. Okay, so it's a really sad time. And what happened when we first got here today?
Well, I'm not really
Who did we meet?
Oh, we met a nice lady at the front who had parents, or not parents, who had in-laws who were survivors of the Jewish Holocaust.
Yeah, so they were probably people who were in a concentration camp, so they had to deal with horrible things, and they were lucky enough to survive. So it's a big deal. So a lot of people that work here have shared Jewish heritage, and a lot of them are connected to the Holocaust in ways like that. So they know people who actually went through these experiences. Okay? Right. That's why it's a great place for people to come visit. All right, let's read this next one. Go ahead.
Times of betrayal and resistance. Throughout France, the Jewish people were evicted from their homes and forced to move. The French community stood by and watched while their neighbors were arrested or forcibly deported to concentration camps like we just talked about. Though many felt, others worked to oppose the Nazis and help those who had been dehumanized and stripped of their civil rights. Intelligence for the Allies. Resistance fighters were always vulnerable to the danger of being caught by the authorities, but often the more pressing fear was personal betrayal, being sent to camps or being murdered.
So what does that mean to you, Sarah?
It's kind of like what I have read in Anne Frank, and so some of the Jews went into hiding, and in Anne Frank they had a cat that they had to give to their neighbor, and it was really sad because they had to go into hiding too.
Okay, so you're learning about Anne Frank. Who is Anne Frank?
Anne Frank is a young Jewish girl who had a sort of diary that she got on her birthday, and she was writing all about the Jewish Holocaust and how they had to go into hiding.
Okay. Where did you see her house?
I I saw it in Germany, I think.
It wasn't Germany. No. It started with the N. Netherlands.
Right.
Okay, so you were in Amsterdam when you got to see Anne Frank's house. Do you remember it? It was really tiny, right? And there were a bunch of hidden corridors, and the staircases were really close together, really hard to walk past each other, right? Okay, so you got to experience that. That's something we highly recommend if someone's in Amsterdam that they get to go experience Anne Frank house. Okay? All right. So let's look over here. So the German Labor was the National Socialist Trade Union Organization, which replaced the various independent trade unions of the Weimar Republic after Adolf Hitler's rise to power. So, do you know what the Weimar Republic was?
No, I do not.
So the Weimar Republic was the ruling power of Germany during World War I. So this was back in the early 1900s. Okay, but after World War I ended, multiple sanctions, which were like rules and stuff, put on. Hey, go get him real quick. So sanctions are when basically a country was in trouble because they did a bunch of bad things. Okay, and the international community combined and told Germany that they had to pay a certain amount of fines and they weren't allowed to do certain things. That's what a sanction is. So that broke up the Weimar Republic. So Germany was in desperate straits. They owed a lot of money. They were embarrassed by the rest of the world. And that created what's called a power vacuum. And that's when the National Socialist Party rose up. And their charismatic leader, Adolf Hitler, came to power. Because they were talking about that Germany deserved better treatment from the rest of the world. That Germany was a proud nation. That they were embarrassed by all the other countries, and that they were actually a superior race to everyone else. Okay, do you understand how that works?
Yes, I do.
Okay, right?
Something I would like to point out is that it might not show it in any of these pictures or tell us so far, but all the Jews in the Holocaust, including Anne Frank, it told me this in her diary, the diary of Anne Frank, that the Jews had to wear yellow stars on all their clothes.
And
they
that
had
represent?
it represented that they were Jewish.
So they had to wear the yellow Star of David to signify to everyone else that they were supposedly less than others, right? Okay, so let's read about the liberation. Okay. In 1944, France was liberated from the Nazis. Those who collaborated with the German regime faced brutal punishments for their actions. For example, women known to have been involved with German soldiers were shamed by having their heads shaved and were often publicly beaten and terrorized. Lucien was able to flee to his family's home in the Burgundy region of France. He made his escape on a bicycle, traveling at night and hiding in cornfields during the day. After liberation, Lucien filed a lawsuit against his supposed best friend for reporting him. The man and his wife wrote letters begging Lucien to forgive them and save them from prosecution. Lucien was not inclined toward forgiveness, writing back a lengthy response that denied the request. He also then notified his legal team that the couple had been harassing him. So I believe this is part of the letter, correct? It's all in French.
Mm-hmm.
You know a little more French than I do. Not enough for us to do this very well. But, okay. So this is a great opportunity for you to learn about French occupation in Germany. If you come here to San Antonio, this small little museum is free, so they have multiple exhibits. This is a temporary exhibit right now. We're not going to be able to get into the rest of this today. But you have stories from survivors who escaped survival and liberation, what they went through. And then on the front side over here, you'll see an exhibit, a permanent exhibit that details the American response to World War II and the Holocaust. And then when we come around on the inside here, we also have a chronological tale
the Jews were treated just because of their gender and their race, and that people weren't very nice back then. The Holocaust was where a lot of people were killed and executed because of their gender and race, because the Nazis thought that they should not live because of what they looked like.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about discrimination. We've talked about that in different lessons before, and this is just another example of discrimination based on what people are like, what they look like, where they're from, their genetics, their heritage, their culture. And this has been done throughout history. We talked about it in the Civil Rights Movement. Do you remember what the Civil Rights Movement was?
Yes, I think I do.
What was that?
It was something that the United States did to free slaves from slavery.
So that was the Civil War. Okay, the Civil War was when slaves were freed, but the Civil Rights Movement was led by Martin Luther King Jr. when African Americans were trying to get equal rights from the American government because they were not treated the same. All right, Mindful Travelers, so we just finished up on a very sobering experience here at the Holocaust Memorial Museum of San Antonio. We learned a lot. Sarah just had some emotional feelings about the people that passed away, the lessons that we learned, and when we shut the video off the last time, we talked to one of the volunteers who told her some of the stories about what some of the people experienced in the ghettos and the concentration camps. Very hard for a little one to hear. I just wanted to jump on real quick to remind you, we do these things to really help people grow. We don't want to shy away from history. We don't want to hide the horrible things that happen, because we feel here at Novel Excursion that you can truly learn through history. Okay, and if we embrace that, embrace our history and know that there were terrible things that happened, the best way to do better is to go headlong into it. So we go straight through it, we learn it, we teach our younger generation, like Sarah over here, about these horrible atrocities that happen and how we can do better. Because the only way we're going to do better is if we are aware. We need to know about it, we need to accept it, we need to have those discussions, those hard discussions, to touch on why it was so horrible and why people acted a certain way, because we all have tendencies where we feel like we're better than someone else. We all may have some tendencies where we discriminate against someone, even if it's unintentional. We have tendencies of being selfish. It's just who we are as humans, and it's important for us to be aware of that and accept that within ourselves and know that we can make a difference. We just have to open our minds, and we have to learn about these things in the past that may be hard, may be terrible. We read a book that said, it was a book on one of the shelves that said, "My grandfather would have shot me." I believe that's what it said, but it was a Black woman writing about how she had a ancestor who was a Nazi. Now think about that for a moment, that someone who was related to you because of the generation they were brought up in would have discriminated against you to a degree that they may have killed you. That is why this is important, because we all have storied pasts. You know, we have lineages that may be something that we may be ashamed of. We may not be happy with what our ancestors did, but that's not a reason to turn a blind eye and pretend it didn't happen. That's an opportunity for growth. And that is what we learned today. And I hope you take that lesson into your life and into your travels. And come join us over on Facebook and join the conversation. Facebook.com/groups/Novel Excursion. We want to hear from you. We want to learn your stories, and we want to help build a community of caring and selfless humans. And it starts with you. It starts today. And as we say here at Novel Excursion,
don't forget to travel mindfully. Bye.
Bye.